Hello guys, in this video we're going to look at how to cut and thread a bit of metal conduit for your metal installation. Now, the bit we'll likely get you to do, because you don't need to do all of it, to save time we'll likely just get you to try putting a coupling on one of the bits of metal conduit, probably the longest bit because it's a little bit easier to work with. Now on both sides we'll make you do a half coupling, what we call a half coupling. The reason we call it a half coupling is because your threads need to fit halfway down this thing here called a coupler. The other thing we have to equate for is this lock ring here. So we need enough threads to cover half this coupling and this lock ring here. We're also going to briefly cover how you will cut your conduit safely before you thread it too. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to cut our bit of conduit before we can thread it. The size that you're going to want to cut it is not just the gap between enclosure and device or device and device. You're going to have to consider the fact you might have a bush that comes out of an enclosure. You might also have threads internal to what it is you are going up against. So here you can see there's about 25mm worth of threads that will go inside of that 90. So we need to compensate for that. What I expect in co-winning is for my guys to cut a bit at 220mm. This might be different depending on the year you're sitting the course and what campus you're on. Your lecturer might even just give you the size to make things a little bit easier. So here, I'm going to want to mark and cut this at 220. Use a permanent pen. Again, your lecturer might not use these. When you use the permanent pens, don't leave the room with them. And what we're going to use to cut it, we're going to use a pipe vise. We wouldn't use a square vise because a square vise is flat. When you put something that's round into it, you're going to have a very, very, very small surface area that actually makes contact with that vise. For you to get decent purchase, you're going to have to over tighten it, and you will actually deform the metal conduit. It's not as difficult to do as you think, and you will ruin it. Instead, you use a pipe vise, and a pipe vise will be able to secure itself all the way around the conduit. So once I'm happy it's secured inside the vise, I'm going to cut it. The campus you're at might decide that you need to wear gloves. I prefer wearing gloves. I would recommend it. Wear safety glasses when you're working with metal. You could get little bits of metal swarf, and if you get that in your eye, it's going to be very painful and likely a trip to the hospital. When I use a hacksaw, I'm going to cut down the side of my thumb and tuck my fingers away. Do not cut with a hacksaw with your fingers like that. What can happen is the cut will come over where you're cutting and you could hurt yourself. But if you want to use your thumb as a guide, I'm okay with that. So that is what that looks like. Once I'm ready, thumb as a guide. And that's us. If you've got a dull hacksaw, it's going to make your life a lot more difficult. We have spare hacksaw blades. Talk to a lecturer if you're unsure where to find them, and he'll help you get one. So now I'm happy with that cut. If I wasn't happy, what I might do is I might take a file and I would file it down. Now, I'm quite happy with that cut. There's not even too much swarf on it, maybe a little bit there. Yeah, so I'm happy with that cut. Next, what I would do is I would ream it. What the reamer does is it gets rid of any burr on the inside of that bit of conduit. Why that's a concern, if I run my cable through that and there's sharp swarf on the outside of it, sharp burr on the outside of it, what could happen is it could damage my cables. So I'm going to take a reaming tool and I'm just going to ream it. And that's just going to get rid of any burr around the inside of that. And I want this to be nice and flat, remember. If it's not flat, get yourself a file, when you use a file, I like my hand on the outside, and it is a double cut file, so it will actually file in the drag, but I prefer just going forward and lifting it. So if I wasn't quite so confident with a hacksaw blade and I cut it at an angle, I could do that, and that would help me flatten off before we thread it. So now I'm happy that I've cut my bit of conduit to the correct length that I want. I'm going to have to mark it and put the threads on it. Now, first we've got to determine how long do we actually have to cut the threads. What you're going to be working with is called a half coupling. Here's a coupling. So a half coupling, we're going to take this size and divide it by 2. The couplings we have are about 34mm. So about half of that, 17. But we don't just have the half coupling. We also have a lock ring on top of it. That's maybe about 3mm. So what I'd say is if you cut it and thread it, roughly about 20mm, that should be about right. So what I would do, take my bit of conduit, take the side I want to put my threads onto, go 20mm down. I'd take my pen, could be a pencil, depends on what your lecturer has, and I mark it 20mm down. Now a wee tip I've got, I'm going to put it in my pipe vise, and I'm actually going to take the hacksaw blade, and I'm not looking to cut it, I'm looking to score it. So I go, remember good practice with the hacksaw, and I just lightly score it. Not looking to cut it, just score it. And then take my pen, and I'm marking inside that line I've just scored. The reason I've done that, when I go to use my threading tool, make sure your threading tool's clean, mine looks mock it. When it comes to using your threading tool, when you put that on that bit of conduit, if you don't do that, you find your mark gets taken off, and that's my reference. That's at 20mm, that's how far I want to put threads on this. So if I lose that mark, how long do I know I need to put my threads on? So when I score it and I put the pen inside the score, usually it will stay as we use your threading tool. Now, when it comes to threading it, safety glasses on, gloves if you're given again. When you're using it, we're going to use cutting paste. With the cutting paste, make sure as soon as you're done, you wash your hands, you use wipes, whatever you've got. Don't put the cutting paste on your eyes or anything like that. Clean down your work as well. We have got, again, the wipes. We have got blue roll. So once you're happy with your work, make sure you clean it down before you accidentally touch it and then touch your face and your eyes. Right. So we are going to use cut and paste, but a wee tip I've found is if you start it off dry without the cut and paste, it can make your life a little bit easier. So the right way to put it on, you want to put it so the die is at the back. Put it on and just give it a little bump. So I push in, give it a little bump as I first turn it. So, go. And the reason I've taken that back off is to put my cut and paste on. I could feel it. If it bites, you'll feel it, you'll know, because it starts to want to pull down the conduit as you twist it. So at that point, I'm happy I've got a bite. Get your cut and paste. It might look like this. Your cut and paste might be a little tin with a brush. Doesn't even have to be a brush. I've seen a bit of plastic used, anything. And you're not looking to paint it with the cut and paste. You're just looking to put a little bit on it. Once the die starts turning on it and the heat starts getting generated, it'll melt and it'll make its way around all the conduit. So glass is done. Gloves on if we're using gloves. Just put a little bit of cut and paste on it. That's plenty. And then we go back on it. Now, as we're cutting our threads, we don't just keep rotating with the threading tool. We're going to put it on for 3, back for 1. On for 3, half turns, back for 1. That allows you to cut the threads, so snap the threads as you're cutting them. Without that, you could contort the conduit, you could damage the die and your threads are going to be quite rough. When I put it on, a little bit of force pushing down and rotating, forward for 3, back for 1. When you work with people, they might say forward for 2, back for 1. Some people can actually count and tell you how many half turns it is to get a half coupling. What I've found, it's worth checking where I'm at. Once I get to the first notch, there, then it's worth checking, seeing where I'm at for a half coupling. I might be there or thereabouts. So, a bit of pressure on, and that's me, that's where I cut to last time. So I go forward for 3, back for 1. So now, I'm about up to that first notch. It's worth me taking off the threading tool and checking it. And there, I've actually got a couple more threads I could put on that. So I'm going to put it back on. So back again, forward for 3, back for 1. Clear any loose swath at the end for the next guy. And that looks good. I'm roughly where I wanted my mark on that. So next, clean your work. If no one is waiting for the threading tool, I would clean that as well. Now there, I'm just cleaning the collar for it. I'm not sticking my hand in the die and turning it. That could cut my hand. I'm just getting rid of the grease, the cut and paste around the outside for the next guy. Get rid of all the cut and paste on it. If it was rough, I mean, it might ruin the threads, but you can maybe take a file to it. I'd be very careful if you do. I'm actually quite happy with that. So let's give it a check. Here's my lock ring. And that's going on pretty well. Here's my coupling. And that's going on very well. So that is how you cut and thread the piece of conduit safely. Thanks for watching.